This video I'm going to be talking about UFC 311. It just wrapped up. We had Makhachev versus Moicano. We got Dvalishvili defending his title against Nurmagomedov, and this was an incredible card. And before I even start talking about the card, I did have the opportunity to go watch UFC 311 live in Los Angeles. It was an incredible experience. It was a very good card. I definitely think that losing the Armin Tsarukyan Makhachev rematch definitely hurt the card. I felt like the main event just did not live up. I mean, not that people had great expectations or high expectations for Moicano in this main event, but I mean, I was kind of hoping that Moicano would do a little bit better. But Makhachev just submitting Moicano in the first round was kind of what we expected. And to be totally honest with you, out of all the fights on the card, I feel like the Makhachev-Moicano fight is the least interesting fight of the night. And it's unfortunate, right? Because, I mean, I wanted to see the Islam Makhachev versus Armin Tsarukyan rematch. And I do have a little bit of a theory on the whole Armin, pulling out of the fight one day, before fight night. I do think that there's something going on with that. I feel like we don't really know the full story. So I'm going to talk all about that in this video and some of the fights on the card. But like I said, I went to go watch this event live. It was an incredible experience. The whole event, the arena, the Intuit Dome, it was absolutely incredible. I mean, this was my first pay-per-view live, and I did not regret it. I wish we would have gotten a better main event, but I mean, the co-main event was incredible. Prochazka versus Hill lived up to the hype. So for that, I felt like the card was worth it. But let's actually talk about the fight. So Islam versus Moicano went exactly as we expected. Islam was going to destroy Renato Moicano. Moicano had no business facing Islam Makhachev. Yes, Moicano has improved. Yes, he's on a fight win streak. But against who? Drew Dober, Benoit Saint-Denis coming off the loss against Dustin Poirier. You know what I'm saying? That fight against Jalen Turner where he almost got knocked out in the first round. And to be honest, if Jalen Turner was a little bit smarter in that fight, I think he could have finished Renato Moicano. But he decided to walk off and look like a badass and then get pissed off at the ref for not stopping that fight. But look, Moicano has improved. He's a good fighter, but he's not elite. So he had no business, going in there with Islam. And I definitely don't think that the one-day notice affected the fight whatsoever. I think Renato Moicano with a full training camp would still get submitted by Islam Makhachev. And he was humble enough to admit that. He was humble enough to say, look, this was not a one-day notice. This was a lifetime notice. You know what I'm saying? I was preparing for a fight. I had a full training camp. He was preparing for someone like Beneil Dariush, who's also a southpaw, who has good grappling, good BJJ. And it still was not enough. You know what I'm saying? It still was not enough. So I definitely think this was the least interesting fight on the card. And the most interesting aspect of this fight, at least, is what's next for Islam Makhachev. And I do have a little bit of a theory with the whole Armin situation. I don't think Armin hurt his back. I do not think he hurt his back. I'm starting to believe that what ended up happening was that Armin Tsarukyan was going to miss weight. He was having a rough weight cut. Maybe he came in a little bit too heavy, too jacked, and he knew that he wasn't going to make weight. He knew that he was struggling to cut down maybe that Thursday night before weigh-ins, and I think he decided to pull out. And the reason why I'm starting to believe this is because Dana White has had such an aggressive reaction to Armin Tsarukyan pulling out. If Armin Tsarukyan truly had a bad back injury, I don't think he would have been reacting or speaking in the tone that he's been speaking. Dana White sounds pissed. He's been saying, no, Armin Tsarukyan is not going to get the next shot. He's going to have to build up to get the next title shot. And not only the tone coming from Dana, right? Because you could just say, okay, Dana's just a salty guy. He's just mad that the main event fell off and, it was a big main event, a big rematch in the lightweight division. Maybe he's just mad because of that and Armin Tsarukyan is injured. But the thing that's starting to convince me that perhaps Armin Tsarukyan isn't that, maybe he does have a back injury, but I truly think that it was more of the weight cut. I think that had more to do with the pullout rather than the back injury. Was that Armin Tsarukyan, like, he's not even vouching for himself. He's not even saying, like, you know what, I still deserve my title shot. I beat Charles Oliveira. You know, I had an unfortunate injury. I'm still the guy that can beat Islam Makhachev. Like, he doesn't sound like that. He's like, yeah, I guess, you know, I do have to fight Charles Oliveira. I'll fight anybody. You know, I need to earn this shot. You know, he doesn't seem that hungry to fight Islam Makhachev. And I think maybe part of the reason knows is that he feels bad because he wasn't going to cut weight. And he knows that the UFC is mad at him, so he knows that, like, I'm not in a position to call for a title shot. You know what I'm saying? Because things happen in this game. Fighters get injured. This is very common. So I don't think it's normal for a fighter to just completely give up on their title shot after all the hard work they've done in the division just because of a back injury that happened the day before. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like there's something else going on. I sense guiltiness or guilt from Armin Tsarukyan, and Dana White is a little bit too angry for this to just be a back injury. I think what ended up happening was that Armin Tsarukyan, he wasn't going to make the weight. He was having weight issues, and yeah, maybe he had a little bit of a back injury. Maybe he could have fought through that, but the main problem was that he was not going to make championship weight, and he was not going to be able to fight for the lightweight division. I think that's ultimately what ended up happening here, more than necessarily the back injury. And you know, what's his name? John McCarthy has actually come out and said that, you know, he thinks that, you know, not from an official source or whatsoever, but he does believe also that it had to do more with weight issues rather than a back injury. And like I said, just Armin Tsarukyan being so, I guess, in favor of fighting like a Charles Oliveira or Michael Chandler, I'll fight anybody, instead of just calling the Islam fight. Because I mean, Armin is kind of in a good spot right now because there's nobody really for Islam Makhachev to fight in the lightweight division. He's already beat Charles Oliveira. He just beat Moicano. He beat Volkanovski. He beat Dustin Poirier. I mean, Gaethje's coming off a loss. He's about to fight Dan Hooker. You know, if Hooker beats Gaethje, nobody wants to see Hooker Islam too. Nobody wants to really see that. And then Charles Oliveira, I want to see that rematch. I think stylistically, it's not a very interesting rematch. I think we know what would happen next. As much as I'm a big Charles Oliveira fan, I would want to see one more fight from Charles Oliveira, one more great win, one more great performance by Charles Oliveira, maybe fighting Max Holloway in the summer, and then winning that fight for me to want to see the rematch again. So if you think about it, the only guy for Islam Makhachev to fight in the lightweight division is Armin Tsarukyan, and the fact that Armin Tsarukyan is so easily just giving up his title shot because of that back injury, it just doesn't sound right. Like, I think what happened was he came in too heavy. You know, it's unprofessional. Dana White was pissed, and he knew that he was gonna have to build his way up. And like, I don't know, I just don't see Armin Tsarukyan being that hungry for the rematch. I think that's very interesting. I'm not saying that that's what ended up happening, but I think that conspiracy at least has some merit to it. So what should be next for Islam? Great performance. Like I said, not competitive whatsoever, not that interesting, but I want to see the Topuria fight. And I know that the hardcore take is that Topuria has not done enough in the featherweight division, but I also think we're at a point right now in the UFC where it's starting to become a little bit of filler fights. We're getting the Strickland Duplessis rematch. Nobody wants to see that. People want to see Duplessis versus Hamzat. There's Volk Topuria. Nobody wants to see Volk Topuria too because we know what happened in the first fight. I think the UFC needs to start taking a more of a performance approach to these matchups. I think we need to get rid of the rankings. Nobody gives a fuck about the rankings. The UFC doesn't even honor the rankings. And the fight to make is Topuria versus Makhachev, because Makhachev does not want to go up and fight Bilal Muhammad. You know, if Shavkat wins, who knows what's going to happen. Maybe that does open the opportunity for Islam to fight at 170. But I think the true matchup is Topuria, man. Topuria, I mean, we've seen time and time again that these featherweights, when they move up to the lightweight division, they have a lot of success. I mean, look at Dustin Poirier, look at Renato Moicano, look at Charles Oliveira, look at Max Holloway. So I think that even though people would say, oh, well, Islam doesn't gain anything from beating Topuria because he's a featherweight, I think that's an absolutely delusional take, guys. That's an absolutely delusional take. Topuria looks absolutely unbeatable right now, has insane aura, has insane confidence. We've seen that these Georgians just have a different aura about them. They fight with such confidence, and I'm going to get to the Merab Umar co-main event. So I think that's the fight to make next. I think Volk Topuria 2 is probably going to happen in April, and then I would love to see Topuria Islam Abu Dhabi. Let's make that fight happen. I think that's the fight that needs to happen next. I just think stylistically it's too interesting of a matchup. And the reason why I don't say Armin's going to get the rematch is because I think Armin's going to end up fighting somebody else. I don't think he's going to wait for that Islam rematch. I think he'll fight a Charles Oliveira. Maybe he fights a Rafa Fiziev. Maybe he fights a Dustin Poirier. So I don't see Armin Tsarukyan getting the rematch. I don't see the UFC making the Charles Oliveira rematch either. So, I mean, I think Topuria is the guy, man. I think Topuria is the guy. I think it would be an amazing fight. I think Islam beating Topuria would do a lot more for his legacy than beating Armin, than beating Charles Oliveira. The only thing that would be obviously better for Islam in terms of his career would be to get that to become double champ and fight Shavkat Ramonov and get that win and get that second belt. But other than that, the fight to make is Topuria, man. The fight to make is Topuria. That's the fight we want to see. I think Topuria would beat him. I don't think that's that hot of a take. Maybe it is a hot take, but I think Topuria would beat him. And I really want to see that fight. So, I mean, this is kind of what we expected from Makhachev. Great performance from him. Now, let's move on to the real main event of the card. We got Merab. Absolutely incredible. Merab Dvalishvili faced off against Umar Nurmagomedov. And before I even talk about this co-main event, I know that I did not post like a prediction video for this card. And so I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm not going to lie and pretend that I thought Merab was going to win this fight. I'm not going to pretend that I picked Prochazka to win his fight. I picked Islam. I mean, that was a clear pick. I picked Merab Dvalishvili. No, not Merab. I picked Umar Nurmagomedov. I picked Hill. I picked Kevin Holland. I picked Jolton Almeida. I picked Peyton Talbot. So in terms of picks, I didn't do too good with this card, and there was a lot of upsets. But I mean, this co-main event lived up to the hype. And even though I was picking Umar Nurmagomedov to win this matchup, I wasn't as confident as some other people that were picking Umar. I know that most of the MMA community was picking Umar to win this matchup against Merab. I wasn't as confident. One of the things that I kept saying before this fight started, live in the arena, I kept saying, I'm worried about Umar's cardio. 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 And sure enough, that fear turned out to be a true fear, a real fear. But even then, I think Umar Nurmagomedov did absolutely incredible in this fight. I think they're both the two best bantamweights in the world. And let's talk about this matchup. I really want to talk about this fight because I absolutely love this fight. This fight was absolutely incredible. This should have been the true main event of the card. Obviously, I still appreciated that we got to see Islam Makhachev fight live, that I got to see him fight live. But this was the true main event. I mean, this was incredibly skilled. And a lot of people were doubting Merab Dvalishvili. And I think I could kind of say that I kind of doubted him a little bit because I didn't pick him to win this fight, even though I did have that big fear of the cardio. One of the things that I had noticed rewatching tape for Umar Nurmagomedov was that he doesn't have high output. He doesn't have high volume. He kind of counter strikes as well. He kind of stays on the back foot at times, which is absolutely horrible, especially if you've never faced somebody like Merab Dvalishvili, who's an absolute alien, who has relentless pressure, who doesn't get tired. And I think Merab showed improvements in this fight. I think he showed improvements in terms of his boxing, in terms of his... I think he had a little bit more power in this fight. I mean, there was times where he kind of stunned Umar Nurmagomedov, and I know part of that also had to do with Umar being so gassed. And like I said, I watched this fight live. So watching the fight live, you don't hear the commentary, you don't hear the advice from the corner in between rounds. So last night, I decided to re-watch the fight, right? When I watched the fight live, I did give the fight to Merab 3-2. I think I gave the first 2 rounds to Umar Nurmagomedov. I gave the 3rd round to Merab slightly. I thought the 3rd round was the closest round. I thought the 4th round was a clear Merab round, and I thought the 5th round was also kind of a close round, but I thought I kind of gave it to Merab. So it was still a very, very close fight, even though I think Merab was the clear winner. But anyway, I decided to go re-watch the fight last night. And rewatching the fight last night, going into the 2nd round, right after Umar won that 2nd round, which was his most clear round, because even the 1st round was very competitive, I saw that Khabib Nurmagomedov told Umar that he needed to wrestle, that he must wrestle, and that he has to only wrestle. And that might be single-handedly the worst corner advice I've ever heard in a championship fight. I could not believe it. And, today I watched MMA Che's video on the Umar Merab fight, and he said exactly what I was thinking. I'm not copying him. You could go to my Twitter, and I posted a tweet saying that I had rewatched the fight yesterday. I don't know if it was before his video, but I basically said the same thing. That might have been the reason why Umar lost this fight. And I am honestly surprised that the Khabib team did not know this before going into the fight. Because as you're watching the fight, even in those early rounds, right, where Umar was having a little bit more success, it was still very competitive. Like, Merab was still having success as well. It wasn't like Merab was just getting absolutely destroyed in those early rounds. You could tell that Merab was clearly the stronger fighter. He was clearly the stronger fighter. So to tell your fighter who has momentum on the feet after the second round that he must wrestle against a cardio machine who's very hard to take down is horrendous advice. Some of the worst advice I've ever seen in a championship fight. And like I said, when I rewatched that, I was in disbelief. I could not believe that Khabib told Umar that. And to be totally honest with you, I would have told Umar this. And I know I'm Monday morning quarterbacking, and it's easy for me to say because I'm not a fighter. I know people are going to say that, and I completely understand that. But, watching the fight live, I would have told Umar, I know you're tired going into that third round. Slow down a bit. If you need to give up this round, give it up. But we're going to go hard in the fourth round. We're going to go hard in the fifth round. You're clearly the better striker. You're clearly the more skilled guy. If you can't take him down, don't try to take him down because you're going to get tired. Let him come to you, and then you outbox him. You're clearly the faster guy. You clearly have the better combinations. You have more pop in your shots. Let's try to win that way. Let's not force the takedowns. Instead, what Umar ended up doing, and even though he didn't go for takedowns right away into that third round, at the end of that third round, he was holding on to Merab, trying to take him down, forcing the takedown. Merab was just standing there. And Umar should have let go and started landing strikes on the feet, and he could not do that. Like, horrible advice, man. I do think Umar could have won this fight, and he's clearly the second best bantamweight in the world, and I definitely want to see the rematch. Does the rematch need to happen next? No. Umar needs to earn his way back. He needs a couple more wins to fight Merab Dvalishvili, maybe fight a Sean O'Malley, maybe fight a Peter Yan, but I definitely think that it was a very winnable fight for Umar. I think there was tactical mistakes. I think there was bad advice from the corner. And I think it was a fight that he could have won easily because I still think that Umar proved that he is the better fighter. I think Merab weaponizes cardio. And if you're tired, it doesn't matter how skilled you are. You're going to get run over. And that's exactly what happened in this fight. I think Merab showed incredible cardio, incredible durability, incredible fight IQ. Great advice from his corner, man. Great advice from his corner. I think going into that third round as well, I think his corner was starting to say, okay, you need to push the pace. This guy's getting tired. He does not like your pace. Beautiful advice from the Merab corner. While on the other hand, Umar was getting horrible advice. So obviously, you don't know any of these things watching the card live, but there was definitely a shift for Umar after that second round. Like I said, I think he could have won the fight easily. It was still a great fight. I think Umar showed that he belongs at the top of this weight class. And I mean, Merab is the bantamweight gold, man. It's undeniable. Beating Umar, beating Sean O'Malley, beating Peter Yan the way he did, and these fights are not even close, beating Jose Aldo, beating Henry Cejudo, beating Marlon Moraes. This guy is an absolute phenom, and it was incredible. I was surprised by how many fans Merab Dvalishvili had in the arena. Most people were actually rooting for Merab, which is crazy because I thought a lot of people hated Merab, but no, a lot of people were rooting for Merab in this fight, and it's great to see somebody like Merab style who's not knocking guys out, who's not, I think he's entertaining, but he's definitely doesn't have the most entertaining style. So to see people still be big fans of Merab because of his personality, because of his confidence in the cage, is absolutely incredible. And I definitely think there's something about these Georgians, this Ilia Topuria, Merab, like they fight with such confidence, with such aura, and they might be the kryptonite of these Dagestanis. And even though, like I said, I think Umar is clearly, not clearly, because obviously Merab, showed improvements in his boxing, was actually landing good combinations, and was definitely stunning Umar. And even though he doesn't have like a lot of power, I think because Umar was so tired, the shots from Merab were starting to affect Umar Nurmagomedov. I mean, Umar was so tired that at the post-fight speech, he couldn't even talk like clearly. Like he was out of breath. He was like, yes, guys, I think I won the fight, guys. I thought when the guy broke my hand in the first round, like he was still out of breath at the post-fight speech. So that just showed like how tired Umar was at the end of this fight. And Merab, I mean, he had so much energy. And Merab, like I said, he's the bantamweight GOAT. This was the best fight on the card. Absolutely incredible. I think what should be next for Merab Dvalishvili at this point is Alexander Pantoja, because Pantoja, he's clearing the flyweight division. Merab has basically cleared the bantamweight division, even though he only has one title defense. And I don't think O'Malley deserves a title shot. I don't think Peter Yan deserves a title shot, nor is the matchup interesting. Umar doesn't deserve the rematch. So who gets the rematch, or who gets to fight Merab? Like, I think it should be Alexander Pantoja. I think that would be an incredible main event. And then you could make maybe Umar Nurmagomedov versus the winner of Song Yudong versus Henry Cejudo. And then you make Peter Yan versus Sean O'Malley too. Because then the winner of that could be the clear number one contender to fight Merab Dvalishvili. And maybe we'll be more interested in seeing a rematch with Merab. And I think Pantoja, because he's been so active, because he's been so dominant in the flyweight division, I think he deserves that opportunity to fight for that double champ belt. So I would love to see that fight next for Merab. I think that's a fight that makes sense. And I definitely think that Umar is going to fight for the title again at some point. He's still a very young fighter. I think he made some tactical mistakes. I think this was a very winnable fight for Umar. And, I mean, it happens, man. It happens. These Dagestanis are not they're not invincible. As much as some fans talk about them like they are, they're not invincible. I think Khabib Nurmagomedov, as dominant as he was, we also have to realize that he never fought a grappler. He fought guys like, his best wins are Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, and Conor McGregor. You know what I'm saying? A lot of strikers. And I'm not saying that there's a clear wrestler that would have beat Khabib Nurmagomedov, but styles make fights. There's fights that become a little bit more challenging. And for Umar, for his title fight to be Merab Dvalishvili, one of the best, if not the best bantamweight of all time, I mean, that's a huge ask. You know what I'm saying? That's a huge ask, especially Umar, who kind of got, I wouldn't say gifted the opportunity, but he got gifted the opportunity to fight Corey Sandhagen, and he didn't really fight. He didn't really have to fight your Peter Yans, these contenders, maybe like your Song Yudongs, your Henry Cejudos, to really get to that title shot. So, like I said, great performance by both of these guys. Definitely the fight of night. Now let's move on to this great fight. Yuri Prochazka versus Jamal Hill lived up to the hype. What an incredible fight. I mean, the crowd went absolutely wild when Yuri Prochazka knocked out Jamal Hill in the third round. And Yuri just looked a step ahead of Jamal Hill. Jamal Hill's footwork continued to be a problem. And the reason why I picked Jamal Hill to win this fight, honestly, because I was going back and forth on this fight, but ultimately the reason why I was picking Jamal Hill was because I thought, you know what, Yuri Prochazka, he gets hurt in every fight, and if he gets hurt by Jamal Hill, I don't see him surviving. Plus, he's been hurt badly in his last couple of fights. Like, he took a shitload of damage in the Alex Pereira rematch. He took a shitload of damage against Alexander Rakic, and then before that, he got gotten hurt by Alex Pereira in the first fight, even though it was an early stoppage. And then before that, he had an absolute war with Glover Teixeira. So I was like, if at any point Jamal Hill was able to hurt him, I don't think Yuri is going to survive. And I think Jamal Hill, even though he's not as explosive and maybe not as powerful as Yuri Prochazka, I think he'll be a little bit more technical, which I was wrong about, right? Because Yuri made adjustments, which I really wasn't expecting. I was like, well, Yuri kind of has to fight the same way, because if he doesn't, if he changes his style way too much, that's kind of what got him to the dance. So I felt like I couldn't trust Yuri, ultimately, is the reason why I picked Hill, more than me saying that Hill is a clear better fighter, if that makes sense. I just felt like, Yuri has taken so much damage. This feels like this might be the beginning of his downfall. Where's his confidence going to be at after fighting Pereira twice and coming off short in both those fights? Jamal Hill could kind of cope and say, oh, I got kind of caught early, like I didn't get dominated, even though it's a stupid excuse. I thought there was good reasons to pick Jamal Hill in this matchup. And even though Jamal Hill lost this fight, he got dropped in the first round, he was able to come back and have success in that second round. And I will say this, guys, even though I was rooting for Yuri Prochazka, I don't think Jamal Hill deserves the hate that he's been getting. I get it. He's a little bit corny. He's a little bit delusional. But he's also playing a character, and it's part of the fun. He's kind of trying to play a villain. I don't think the guy's a bad guy, and he gave us an incredible fight. Like, he actually came to fight. He was actually trying to strike with Yuri Prochazka, which is absolutely insane, which gave the fans an incredible fight. So people need to give Jamal Hill his credit. He actually did have success in this fight. In the second round, he made a great adjustment by going to the body, kind of hurting Yuri, slowing him down. He won the second round clearly. I thought that in the third round, he started to overextend a little bit too much with his shots. And that's when Yuri was able to counter him with a nasty, I think it was a right hook. It might have been a left hook. I'm going to say right hook, and was able to finish him. So amazing fight. It lived to the hype. I think that Jamal Hill needs to keep his head up. I want to see Jamal Hill win his next fight. Unfortunately, I think he's going to end up fighting Khalil Roundtree, which is going to be an incredible fight. And I think for Yuri, I think he needs to fight the winner of Carlos Ulberg versus John Blachowicz, because even though, beating Jamal Hill is a good win, he's already fought Alex Pereira twice, and I don't think anybody is really that interested to see the trilogy. So let's see Yuri go on a win streak before we see that Pereira trilogy. Or who knows, if Ankalaev gets the upset. I think if Ankalaev gets the upset, maybe they make a rematch with Pereira. So I don't see Yuri Prochazka fighting for the title anytime soon. So I think the fight for Yuri after this is John Blachowicz versus Carlos Ulberg. And for Jamal Hill, he needs to fight like a Khalil Roundtree, because who's he gonna fight? Like, I don't really see who he fights. And like I said, even though he lost his fight against Yuri, I still think he put an incredible performance in this fight.